The weeks following Danny's examination changed everything at the Galactic Academy of Sciences. News of his unconventional solution spread beyond the station and reached dozens of worlds across the galaxy. Humans were being discussed in scientific circles and diplomatic chambers, and the conversations were very different from before. Danny found himself becoming something he had never expected to be. A symbol, a representative of his entire species. Students who had once ignored him now approached him with questions and respect. Faculty members who had dismissed humans as primitive newcomers were revising their assumptions. Lyra remained Danny's closest friend, and together they navigated the new attention that followed him everywhere. She helped him understand the complex social dynamics of the academy, and he taught her about human history and culture. Their friendship grew deeper with each passing day. One afternoon, Lyra found Danny teaching an informal class in one of the common areas. A dozen students from different species had gathered around him, and he was demonstrating various human survival techniques. "This is called a bow drill," Danny explained, holding up a simple wooden device he had constructed. "Humans used this to start fires for thousands of years before we discovered other methods. You rotate this stick rapidly against this base, and the friction creates heat. Eventually, you get an ember." A young reptilian student tried the technique, and after several minutes, a tiny wisp of smoke appeared. The student's eyes went wide with amazement. "It works," he exclaimed. "But it takes so much effort. Why would you do this when there are easier ways?" Danny smiled. "Because sometimes you do not have easier ways. Sometimes all you have is your knowledge and your determination. Humans learned to survive, not because we were the strongest or the fastest, but because we refused to give up." Lyra watched with pride as Danny shared his knowledge with species from across the galaxy. He was building bridges between worlds, one lesson at a time. That evening, Danny received an unexpected message. Professor Vexarn was requesting a private meeting. Danny stared at the message for a long time. He did not know what to expect from the professor who had tried so hard to make him fail. Part of him wanted to refuse, but another part was curious. "I think you should go," Lyra said when he told her about the request. "If nothing else, you will learn why he hates humans so much." Danny nodded. "You are right. I need to understand him." He made his way through the Academy's corridors to Vexarn's private study. The door opened automatically, and Danny stepped into a room filled with artifacts and specimens from hundreds of worlds. Vexarn was standing by a window, looking out at the stars. "Thank you for coming," the professor said without turning around. His voice was different, softer, less hostile. Danny remained near the door. "You wanted to see me." Vexarn finally turned to face him. His compound eyes studied Danny for a long moment. "I wanted to apologize," he said. Danny was not sure he had heard correctly. "Apologize." Vexarn moved to a chair and lowered himself slowly. For the first time, Danny noticed how old the professor looked. How tired. 23 cycles ago, Vexarn began. A human student attended this academy. He was brilliant, perhaps the most intelligent being I had ever taught. But he was also arrogant, cruel. He took pleasure in humiliating others. Danny remained silent and let the professor continue. "I made a minor error in one of my research papers," Vexarn said. "A small mistake that anyone could have made. This human student discovered it and exposed it publicly. He did not correct me privately as any decent person would. He waited until I was presenting before the entire faculty, and then he destroyed my credibility in front of everyone." He laughed while he did it. "I'm sorry," Danny said quietly. "That must have been painful." Vexarn nodded. "I allowed that single experience to shape my view of your entire species. Every human who came to this academy after that faced my prejudice. I designed tests that were impossible for them to pass. I wanted them to fail because I wanted to prove that humans did not belong here." He looked up at Danny was something like shame in his eyes. "But you proved me wrong," Vexarn continued. "You showed me that the actions of one individual do not represent an entire species. You demonstrated intelligence and resourcefulness and humility. Everything that other humans lacked, you possessed." Danny moved closer to the professor. "I appreciate you telling me this," he said. "It takes courage to admit when you are wrong." Vexarn made a clicking sound that Danny recognized as Kathrani laughter. "Courage. Yes, perhaps. Or perhaps I am simply tired of carrying this hatred for so many cycles." They sat in silence for a moment. Then Vexarn spoke again. "I would like to offer you an apprenticeship in my department," he said. "You would study survival sciences under my direct supervision. It is the first such offer I have ever made to a human." Danny was stunned. "You want me to study under you?" "I want to learn from you," Vexarn corrected. "You have knowledge and perspectives that my other students lack. And perhaps through working together we can both grow beyond our limitations." Danny considered the offer. This was the professor who had tried to destroy him. But it was also a being who had just shown remarkable vulnerability and honesty. People could change. Species could change. That was the whole point. "I accept," Danny said finally. Vexarn extended one of his 6 limbs and Danny shook it. A gesture of respect between two very different beings. Later that night, Danny stood on the observation deck and watched the stars. Lyra found him there, as she often did, and stood beside him in comfortable silence. "What are you thinking about?" she asked. Eventually, Danny adjusted his glasses and smiled. "I am thinking about how the smallest tools can solve the biggest problems." Lyra looked at him curiously. "What do you mean?" Danny gestured at the stars. "My grandfather gave me these glasses when I was a child. He said they would help me see clearly. I think he meant more than just physical vision. He meant understanding, perspective, the ability to look at a problem from a different angle. And that is what you did on the test world," Lyra said. Danny nodded. "Everyone else saw an impossible situation. A frozen world with no way to create fire. But I looked at it differently. I saw sunlight. I saw dry tinder. I saw opportunity where others saw only obstacles." Lyra was quiet for a moment. "Do you think all humans can do this?" she asked. "See things that others cannot." Danny thought about his grandfather and all the lessons he had taught. He thought about human history and the countless times his species had overcome impossible odds. He thought about the future and all the humans who would come to this academy after him. "I think," Danny said slowly, "that humans are very good at finding hope where there should be none. We have a gift for seeing the light even in the darkest moments. It is what has kept us alive for millions of years. And it is what will carry us to the stars." Lyra smiled and looked out at the galaxy spreading before them. "Then I think the galaxy is lucky to have you," she said. Danny smiled back. The stars seemed brighter now than they ever had before. His grandfather's glasses reflected their light, like tiny diamonds, and for a moment Danny felt connected to everyone who had come before him. All the humans who had struggled and survived and dreamed of reaching this place. He had honored their legacy. He had proven that humanity belonged among the stars. And this was only the beginning. The future stretched out before him, full of possibility and wonder, and Danny Cole was ready to meet it. Danny materialized on the extraction platform, and immediately his legs gave out beneath him. Medical staff rushed forward to catch him and wrap him in heated blankets. His body temperature had dropped dangerously low despite the fire, and his hands were covered in small frostbite marks. But he was alive, and he was smiling. Commander Beth Porter pushed through the crowd to reach him. "Danny," she said, and her voice was thick with emotion. "You did it. You actually did it." Danny looked up at her through exhausted eyes. "I told you," he said weakly. "Humans adapt." The medical staff took him to the recovery ward where they treated his injuries and monitored his vital signs. Word of his unconventional solution spread through the academy like wildfire. Within hours, everyone knew about the human, who had started a fire using nothing but his eyeglasses. Students from dozens of species came to visit Danny in the recovery ward. They wanted to understand how he had done it. They wanted to know the science behind his solution. Danny explained it patiently to each visitor. It is called a convex lens, he said, holding up his glasses. The shape of the glass bends light rays and focuses them into a single point. When you concentrate enough light into a small area, it generates heat. Enough heat to start a fire. A young Paraxian student tilted his head in confusion. But we have perfect vision, he said. We do not use lenses. Why would anyone keep something that corrects a flaw? Danny smiled. These were my grandfather's glasses. He gave them to me before he died. I keep them to remember him. But they also remind me of something important. What is that? The student asked. That sometimes our weaknesses can become our strengths, Danny replied. My eyes do not work perfectly, but because of that I have these lenses. And today these lenses saved my life. The Paraxian student looked at Danny with new respect. I never thought of it that way, he admitted. Lyra arrived later that afternoon carrying a container of hot soup from the cafeteria. She sat beside Danny's bed and watched him eat with a mixture of pride and relief. I was so worried, she admitted. When you were just standing there in the beginning, I thought you had given up. Danny shook his head. I was observing, he explained, looking at the position of the sun, checking the clarity of the atmosphere, making sure conditions were right. My grandfather taught me that observation is the first step in survival. You cannot solve a problem until you understand it. Your grandfather sounds like a wise man, Lyra said. He was, Danny agreed quietly. He would have loved to see this place. He always believed that humans would reach the stars someday. He just did not live long enough to see it happen. They sat together in comfortable silence for a while. Then Lyra spoke again. Vexarn has called an official review, she said carefully. He is claiming that you cheated. Danny's expression hardened. Cheated? How? Says that using an optical device constitutes technology and should disqualify you from the test. Danny set down his soup container. The rules said no active technology. Glasses are not active. They do not require power or programming. They are just shaped glass. No different from a rock or a stick, I agree, Lyra said. But Vexarn is powerful. He has been at this academy for 200 cycles. Many faculty members respect him. Danny pushed himself up in his bed. Then I will have to convince them, he said. When is the review? Tomorrow morning, Lyra replied. Director Thrum will preside. Danny nodded firmly. I will be ready. The review chamber was packed the next morning. Students and faculty from across the academy had gathered to witness the hearing. Danny stood at the front of the room facing a panel of senior professors. Director Thrum sat at the center of the panel. The director was an ancient being who resembled a living tree with bark-like skin and branches growing from his head. He had overseen the academy for over 500 cycles, and his word was law. Professor Vexarn stood opposite Danny, and his compound eyes glittered with barely contained anger. Director Thrum spoke first. His voice was slow and deep like wind moving through leaves. We are here to review the examination performance of human student Danny Cole. Professor Vexarn has raised concerns about the validity of the results. Professor, please present your case. Vexarn stepped forward. The rules of the survival examination are clear, he said. All technology must be surrendered before the test. The human used an optical device to focus sunlight and create fire. This constitutes technology and should disqualify him from the examination. Thrum turned to Danny. How do you respond? Danny took a deep breath. Director, with respect, I disagree with Professor Vexarn's interpretation. My glasses are not technology in the meaningful sense. They do not require power or programming. They are simply pieces of curved glass set in a frame. They are no more technological than a naturally occurring crystal. Vexon's mandibles clicked angrily. The glasses were manufactured. They were designed. That makes them technology. Danny remained calm. The Paraxian students used their heat-generating organs to start their fires, he said. Those organs evolved over millions of years. They were designed by nature. Does that make them technology? Vexarn hesitated. That is different. Is it? Danny pressed. The Kathrani students use their exoskeletons to resist the cold. Those shells are biological armor designed by evolution. The Valorians use their feathers for insulation. All of these are tools provided by nature. My glasses are a tool provided by human ingenuity. They correct a deficiency in my vision. They are part of me. Commander Beth Porter stepped forward. Director, I have prepared historical documentation showing that humans have used lenses for fire starting for over 3,000 years. This technique predates electricity. It predates modern manufacturing. It is an ancient skill passed down through generations. Director Thrum studied the documentation carefully. His ancient eyes moved slowly across the pages. Finally, he looked up. The examination rules prohibit active technology, he said slowly. Devices that generate power. Machines that process information. Tools that require external energy to function. Passive materials such as glass do not fall under this prohibition, ruling in favor of the human student. The examination results stand. A murmur ran through the crowd. Danny felt a wave of relief wash over him. Vexon stood rigid with anger, but he could not argue with the director's ruling. Furthermore, Thrum continued, I'm noting for the record that this examination has revealed a bias in our testing procedures. We have designed challenges that favor species with natural advantages, while ignoring the adaptive capabilities of species like humans. This will be reviewed and corrected. Danny looked at Vexarn, and for a moment, their eyes met. The professor's compound eyes were unreadable, but Danny thought he saw something there. Not defeat exactly. Perhaps the beginning of understanding. The crowd began to disperse, and Lyra rushed forward to embrace Danny. You did it, she said. You actually did it. Danny hugged her back. We did it, he corrected. I could not have done this without your support. Beth Porter approached with a warm smile. You have made history today, Danny, she said. You are the first human to pass Vexarn's survival examination. This will change everything for humans at the Academy. Danny looked around at the faces watching him. Species that had dismissed humanity as primitive were now looking at him with respect. He had proven something important today. Not just about himself, but about his entire species. Humans belonged among the stars. They had earned their place. The transport beam deposited Danny on the frozen surface of cold forest. 7, and immediately he felt the cold hit him like a physical blow. The air was sharp and bitter, and every breath burned in his lungs. He was wearing only a thin basic uniform that provided almost no protection from the freezing temperature. His glasses fogged up instantly, and he had to wipe them clean with his sleeve. He looked around at his environment. The forest stretched out in every direction with tall, dark trees rising toward a pale gray sky. Snow covered the ground in a thick blanket, and the silence was absolute. No birds sang. No animals moved. He was completely alone. Danny knew he had approximately 4 hours before hypothermia began to set in. After that, his body would start shutting down. His thoughts would become confused. His movements would become slow and clumsy. Then eventually he would fall asleep in the snow and never wake up. He did not have time to waste. Back at the academy, thousands of students and faculty gathered in the observation chamber to watch the examinations. Giant screens showed feeds from each test world, and Professor Vexon stood. At the front, providing commentary on the different students the Paraxian student has already created. Fire Vexarn announced as one screen showed a lizard-like being warming himself by a roaring blaze. Excellent use of natural heat generation abilities. The Valorian student has constructed an insulated shelter using her feathers for warmth. Also excellent. Then the view shifted to Danny's screen. The human had not moved from his starting position and appeared to be simply standing in the snow, looking around. The human seems confused, Vexarn observed with barely hidden satisfaction. Perhaps he is realizing the impossibility of his situation. Without tools or natural abilities, he has no way to create fire. He has approximately 4 hours before hypothermia becomes fatal. Lyra watched the screen with growing anxiety. She had faith in Danny, but watching him stand motionless in the freezing cold was terrifying. Beth Porter stood nearby, and her hands were clenched into tight fists. On the frozen planet, Danny finally began to move. He walked through the snow with purpose and started gathering materials. Dead leaves from beneath the trees, small dry twigs, strips of bark from fallen branches. He worked quickly and efficiently, and his hands were already beginning to lose feeling from the cold. He found a clear area where the sunlight broke through the canopy above. The pale sun hung low in the sky, but its light was strong and direct. Danny knelt in the snow and arranged his gathered materials into a small pile. The tinder was dry and perfect for catching fire. Now he just needed a spark. Back in the observation chamber, Vexarn watched with confusion as Danny continued gathering what appeared to be random forest debris. "What is he doing?" the professor asked. "Building a nest." "Does he think he can sleep through the cold?" Several students laughed nervously, but Lyra remained silent. She was watching Danny's movements, and she noticed something the others did not. He was positioning himself very carefully in relation to the sun. Danny knelt beside his pile of tinder and looked up at the sky. The sun was bright, and the air was clear. Perfect conditions. He took a deep breath and reached up to remove his glasses from his face. The world immediately became blurry and unfocused. Danny could barely see his own hands in front of him. But he did not need to see clearly for what came next. He just needed to feel. He held the glasses up toward the sun and tilted them carefully. The thick lenses caught the light and bent it and focused it into a single concentrated point. Danny positioned this point of light directly on the driest piece of tinder in his pile. In the observation chamber, someone gasped. "What is he doing?" Vexarn demanded. "Explain this." No one answered. No one understood what they were seeing. Danny held the glasses perfectly still and watched as the focus point of sunlight grew brighter and more intense on the tinder. His hands were shaking from the cold, but he forced them to remain steady. Everything depended on this moment. Seconds passed. Then a minute. Danny's fingers were going numb, and his body was trembling violently, but he refused to move. He kept the light focused and waited. Then he saw it. A tiny wisp of smoke rising from the tinder. Danny's heart pounded in his chest. He adjusted the angle slightly, and the smoke increased. The tinder was charring and turning black under the concentrated heat of the sun. "Come on," Danny whispered through chattering teeth. "Come on." A small orange glow appeared in the tinder. Then a tiny flame flickered to life. In the observation chamber, the room fell completely silent. Every eye was fixed on the screen, showing Danny carefully nurturing the tiny flame. He blew on it gently and added small twigs, and the flame grew larger. Within minutes, he had a sustainable fire burning brightly in the snow. "Impossible," Vexarn hissed. "How is this possible?" Lyra felt tears forming in her eyes. "He did it," she whispered. He actually did it. On the frozen planet, Danny sat beside his fire and let the warmth wash over him. His hands ached as the feeling returned to them, but he did not care. He had done it. He had created fire with nothing but sunlight, and a pair of old glasses. He put the glasses back on his face, and the world came back into focus. The fire crackled and danced before him, and Danny smiled for the first time since arriving on this frozen world. Thank you, grandfather, he said quietly. He spent the next several hours building up the fire and constructing a simple shelter from branches and leaves. He created a signal fire that produced thick smoke visible from high above. He demonstrated knowledge of water collection and food identification. He did everything the test required and more. Back in the observation chamber, Vexarn stood frozen at the front of the room. His compound eyes were fixed on the screen, and his mandibles clicked together in agitation. He could not believe what he was seeing. The human was not just surviving. He was thriving. Commander Beth Porter allowed herself a small smile. Other faculty members were whispering to each other and pointing at Danny's screen. Students from dozens of species watched in amazement as the supposedly primitive human demonstrated survival skills that rivaled the most advanced beings in the academy. Lyra turned to the Valorian student beside her. He used his corrective lenses to focus sunlight, she explained excitedly. It is basic physics. The lens bends light and concentrates it into a single point hot enough to start a fire. The other student stared at her in disbelief. That is brilliant, he said. Why did none of us think of that? Because Lyra said, watching Danny tend his fire, we underestimated what humans are capable of. The 12 hours passed, and Danny was extracted from the test world. He stood on the transport platform, tired and cold, but triumphant. The fire he had created was still burning brightly behind him as he vanished in a shimmer of light. He had passed the test. He had proven that humans belonged in the stars. The examination briefing chamber was packed with students from every corner of the galaxy. Danny sat near the middle with Lyra beside him, and together they watched as Professor Vexarn took his place at the front of the room. The giant insectoid professor activated a holographic display, and the image of a planet appeared floating in the air. Above the students, each of you has been assigned a specific test world, Vexarn announced in his sharp, clicking voice. The environments have been selected based on your species' weaknesses. Your challenge is to demonstrate that you can overcome those weaknesses and survive. Danny watched as the hologram changed, showing different worlds for different students. A desert world for a species that needed constant moisture. An ocean world for a species that could not swim. Each test was designed to push the students to their limits. Then the hologram changed again, and Danny saw his world. It was a cold forest covered in snow, with tall dark trees, and a pale sun hanging low in the gray sky. The temperature reading showed it was far below freezing. Human student, Danny Cole Vexarn announced, and every eye in the room turned to look at Danny. Your test world is designated Cold Forest 7. The primary challenge is simple. Create fire for warmth and signaling. You have 12 hours to complete this objective, or you will be extracted and marked as failed. Danny studied the hologram carefully. The forest looked harsh, but not impossible. He had seen similar environments on Earth, and his grandfather had taught him how to survive in such places. But then Vexarn continued speaking, and Danny's confidence wavered. As I stated previously, Vexarn said all technology will be stripped from you before the test. Neural implants will be deactivated. Any tools or devices will be confiscated. You will face your test world with only your natural biological abilities. Danny felt his stomach tighten. Humans had no natural ability to create fire. They could not shoot flames from their hands or generate heat from their bodies. Without tools, they were helpless in the cold. The hologram showed other students and their advantages. The Paraxians had special organs that produced intense heat. They could warm themselves easily and start fires with a touch. The Kethrani, like Vexarn, had thick exoskeletons that protected them from extreme temperatures. Even Lyra's species, the Valorians, had dense feathers that kept them warm in any climate. Humans had none of these things. They had soft skin that froze quickly and bodies that lost heat faster than almost any other species in the galaxy. The test was designed for Danny to fail. After the briefing ended, Danny remained in his seat staring at the empty space where the hologram had been. Lyra sat quietly beside him, and she did not know what to say. Commander Beth Porter appeared at Danny's side. Her face was tight with frustration. "I fought against this assignment," she said quietly. "I argued that it was unfair and specifically designed to target human weaknesses. But Vexon has authority over test assignments, and he refused to change it." Danny nodded slowly. "He expected this," he said. "He wants to prove that humans do not belong here." Beth sat down across from him. "Danny, I need you to understand something. No one will blame you if you fail this test. It is specifically designed to be impossible for humans. You can withdraw now and return home with honor." Danny looked up at her, and there was something hard in his eyes. "No," he said firmly. "I am not withdrawing. If I quit now, every human who comes after me will face the same prejudice. I need to show them that we can do this." Beth studied him for a long moment, and then a small smile crossed her face. "Your grandfather would be proud," she said. After Beth left, Danny pulled up the environmental briefing on his personal display. He read every detail about Cold Forest 7, the atmosphere composition, the vegetation types, the star's intensity and position. He asked questions that seemed random to others, but made perfect sense to him. Lyra watched him with growing curiosity. "What are you looking for?" she asked. Danny pointed to a line in the briefing. "The star. It is a yellow dwarf similar to Earth's sun. The atmosphere is clear with minimal cloud cover. Sunlight reaches the surface with high intensity." Lyra tilted her head. "What does that matter?" "You cannot eat sunlight." Danny smiled, but did not explain. He continued reading and making notes. He asked the briefing officer about the types of wood in the forest and whether there was dry bark and dead leaves on the ground. The officer seemed confused by the questions, but provided the answers. Later that evening, Danny and Lyra sat together in the observation lounge. The stars stretched out before them like a blanket of diamonds, and for a while, neither of them spoke. "Tell me about your grandfather," Lyra said finally. Danny leaned back in his chair. He was a wilderness survival instructor. He spent his whole life teaching people how to survive in harsh environments with nothing but their knowledge and their hands. He used to take me camping when I was a child, and he would show me old techniques. Things that humans have known for thousands of years. "What kind of techniques?" Lyra asked. Danny touched his glasses. "Ways to find water. Ways to build shelter. Ways to start fire without matches or lighters." He said that our ancestors survived ice ages with nothing but their intelligence and their will to live. He believed that modern humans had forgotten those skills, but that they were still inside us waiting to be remembered. Lyra looked at him with new understanding. "You think you can use these old techniques to pass the test?" Danny nodded. "Vexarn thinks that taking away our technology makes us helpless. But humans survived for hundreds of thousands of years before we had technology. We did not suddenly become capable when we invented machines. We were always capable. We just found new ways to express it." The next morning, Danny requested permission to bring one personal item with him to the test. The rules allowed for a single non-technological item for psychological comfort, and Vexon approved the request with a smug expression on his face. "What could the human possibly bring?" Vexon said to his assistant. "A photograph, perhaps. A small toy. It will not help him survive." Danny heard about the comet later, and he smiled. "Let him think that," he said to Lyra. "Let him think I'm already beaten." Lyra looked at the glasses on Danny's face. "That is your personal item," she realized. "Your grandfather's glasses." Danny nodded. "They are not just for seeing. he said quietly. They are for remembering. And sometimes memory is the most powerful tool we have. The night before the test, Danny lay in his quarters and stared at the ceiling. He thought about his grandfather and all the lessons he had taught him. He thought about the millions of humans on Earth who were counting on him to succeed. He thought about every human who would come to this academy after him and what his failure or success would mean for them. He closed his eyes and made a promise. He would not fail. He would find a way. He would show the galaxy what humans were capable of. Tomorrow everything would change. The shuttle doors opened and Danny Cole stepped onto the docking platform of the Galactic Academy of Sciences. He had dreamed of this moment for years, but nothing could have prepared him for what he saw. The station was massive and stretched out in every direction like a small city floating among the stars. Thousands of beings from hundreds of different worlds walked through the corridors, and Danny had never felt so small in his entire life. He adjusted his glasses and picked up his bag. A tall woman in a military uniform was waiting for him near the entrance gate. She had short brown hair and kind eyes, and Danny recognized her immediately from the video calls they had shared over the past months. Commander Beth Porter smiled and extended her hand. "Welcome to the Academy, Danny. How was your trip?" Long, Danny admitted, shaking her hand. "But worth it. This place is incredible." Beth nodded and began walking, and Danny followed her through the crowded corridors. Beings of all shapes and sizes passed them by. Some had scales and others had feathers. Some walked on two legs and others floated through the air. Danny tried not to stare, but it was difficult. "You're one of only 3 humans ever accepted into the Advanced Sciences program," Beth explained as they walked. "That is a big deal, Danny. A lot of people are watching you. No pressure then," Danny said with a nervous laugh. Beth stopped walking and turned to face him. Her expression became serious. "I need to warn you about something. There is a professor here named Vexar. He teaches survival sciences and he has never passed a human student. He does not believe we belong here." Danny frowned. "Why not?" Beth sighed. "A human student embarrassed him publicly about 20 years ago. Corrected his research in front of the entire faculty. Vexarn has held a grudge against our species ever since. He will be one of your examiners." Danny nodded slowly. "I understand. I will be careful." They continued walking until they reached a large circular chamber filled with new students. The orientation hall was beautiful, with high ceilings and windows that looked out at the stars. Danny found a seat near the back and Beth gave him one last encouraging nod. Before leaving, Danny looked around at his fellow students. Most of them were gathered in small groups talking in languages he did not understand. He felt very alone sitting there by himself. Then a shadow fell over him and he looked up. Standing before him was a creature unlike any he had seen. She had a humanoid form, but her arms were covered in beautiful golden feathers and her eyes were large and bright like polished amber. She tilted her head and studied him with obvious curiosity. "You are the human," she said. Her voice was musical and pleasant. Danny nodded. "I am Danny Cole. Nice to meet you." "I am Lyra Sumwing," she replied. "I am Valorian." She sat down next to him without asking permission. "What are those things on your face?" Danny touched his glasses. "These are corrective lenses. My eyes do not work perfectly, so these help me see clearly." Lyra leaned closer and examined them with fascination. "How strange. My species has perfect vision. Most advanced species simply grow new eyes or use neural implants if there is a problem. Why do you not do that?" Danny smiled softly. "These were my grandfather's glasses. He gave them to me before he passed away. I keep them to remember him. They work fine and I like having something of his with me." Lyra seemed to consider this for a moment. "That is a good reason," she decided. "Sentiment is valuable even if it is not logical." Before Danny could respond aloud, tone echoed through the chamber, and everyone fell silent. A door at the front of the room opened, and a creature walked in that made Danny's blood run cold. Professor Vexarn was a Kethrani, and he looked like a giant insect standing upright. He had 6 limbs and a hard shell covering his body, and his head was dominated by 2 massive compound eyes that seemed to see everything at once. He moved with precise mechanical steps, and when he spoke, his voice was sharp and clicking. "Welcome new students," Vexarn announced. "I am Professor Vexarn, and I oversee the Survival Sciences examination. In 3 rotations, you will each face a practical test on a simulated hostile world. Your goal is simple: survive." He paused, and his compound eyes swept across the room. They stopped on Danny and lingered there for an uncomfortable moment. "Some species," Vexarn continued, "are naturally suited for survival. They have evolved powerful bodies and useful abilities. Other species are less fortunate. They are soft and weak and primitive. History shows us that these species rarely succeed in my examinations." Danny felt the words like a punch to his chest. He knew Vexarn was talking about humans. "The examination will strip you of all technology," Vexarn explained. "Implants will be deactivated. Tools will be confiscated. You will face your test world with nothing but your natural abilities. Those who pass will continue in the program. Those who fail will return to their homeworlds." He turned and walked toward the exit. "Prepare yourselves," he said without looking back. "Many of you will not be here next week." The door closed behind him, and the chamber erupted in nervous conversation. Lyra turned to Danny with concern in her eyes. "He was looking directly at you," she said. "He wants you to fail." Danny nodded slowly. "I noticed. What will you do?" Lyra asked. Danny thought about his grandfather and the stories he used to tell about surviving in the wilderness with nothing but knowledge and determination. He thought about all the humans throughout history who had faced impossible odds and found ways to overcome them. "I will prepare," Danny said quietly, "and I will not give up." Lyra studied him for a long moment. There was something in his eyes that she had not expected to see. It was not fear or despair. It was quiet determination, and it burned like a small flame in the darkness. "You are different," she said finally. "Most beings would be terrified right now. Why are you so calm?" Danny adjusted his glasses and looked out the window at the stars. "My grandfather taught me something when I was young. He said that humans have never been the strongest or the fastest or the most powerful. But we have something that many species do not understand. We adapt. We learn. We find ways to survive when there should be no way." Lyra considered his words. "And you believe you can apply this to Vexarn's test?" "I believe," Danny said, turning to face her, "that Professor Vexarn has no idea what humans are capable of. And I think it is time someone showed him." A small smile crossed Lyra's feathered face. "I think I would like to see that," she said. "Perhaps we can prepare together." Danny smiled back, and in that moment he felt a little less alone. "I would like that." Outside the window, the stars continued their eternal dance, and somewhere among them, Danny's home world was waiting for news of his success or failure. He thought about everyone who was counting on him, and he made a silent promise to himself. He would not fail. He would find a way. That was what humans did.